Hello, my name is Paul Gosling and I manage the recommended list for the cereals and oilseeds at the AHDB. Over the next few minutes, I just want to give you an overview of the new winter oilseed rape varieties added to the recommended list for 2024-2025. Before I do that though, I just want to give you a summary of the 2024 trials which were quite challenging for us. The wet caused us problems over a lot of trials, as with commercial situations. We suffered particularly from cabbage stem flea beetle, pigeons, clubroot and from flooding, with almost half the fungicide treated and over one of the untreated trials having been abandoned by the time we got to harvest. We also saw some very high levels of light leaf spot in northern trials with plant stunting in some untreated trials. That meant the candidate varieties have been severely tested, although there haven't been any significant changes in the ratings of the current varieties, as disease pressure is taken into account when we calculate the ratings. So moving on to the new recommendations. Most of the new recommendations are regional, and that reflects the fact that much more so than any other crop, you do get big regional differences in performance of varieties. We've seen some large yield increases in several categories. A new conventional winter oilseed rape for the north, which pushes yield performance higher, and a big step forward in terms of yield and disease resistance for clubroot-resistant varieties. So looking first of all at what I call the general purpose varieties, so these are non-specialist varieties. We've got a number of hybrids and one conventional. So starting at the top, we've got LG Adapt, a hybrid variety with a UK recommendation from Lima grain. Then have Hinster, a hybrid variety with an east-west recommendation from KWS. Magellan, a hybrid variety with an east-west recommendation from Lima grain. Maverick, a hybrid with an east recommendation from MPZU. LG Avenger, a hybrid with a northern recommendation from Lima grain, and finally Powerhouse, a conventional recommendation for the north from Elsons. And I should point out that for LG Adapt, Magellan and LG Avenger, they have not yet been added to the GB and Northern Ireland variety lists, but they have passed all the tests and we expect them to be added in January. A number of varieties have been removed this year: LG Adonis, LG Averon, PT303, Dart, Tennyson, and LG Constructor CL, the Clearfield variety. As I said, we also have some new clubroot-resistant varieties. We've actually got two this year. So from MPZU, we've got Crusoe, which has been given a UK recommendation, and Cromputer from DSV with the UK recommendation, and that is not a typo, it's Cromputer, not computer. And just to give you an illustration of how effective this clubroot-resistant can be, there's a picture at the bottom there of one of our trials which was affected by clubroot. We didn't know there was clubroot in the field. There turned out to be a big patch of clubroot, and the variety remaining standing in the middle is a clubroot-resistant variety, and all the dead around it are non-clubroot-resistant varieties. So in most cases, the genetics does work. If you use it too much, it can be overcome, and there are parts of northeast Scotland where the genetics don't work. But for most places, you will still get a good response from using a clubroot-resistant variety. But looking first at the general purpose varieties for the East and West and the UK, what I'm going to do over these next few slides is compare the new varieties with some established varieties. These are what we call our comparator varieties. And when the committees are looking at the new varieties, they put them up against these comparator varieties and say, are they better than the comparator varieties in some way? And if they are, they can be added to the recommended list. So starting with LG Adapt to start with, has a UK gross yield of 108%, well ahead of Ambassador, which although it's been around for a while now is still quite popular, but ahead of Armada. East-West gross output of 108%, well ahead of Armada and Ambassador, and a Northern gross output of 108% again, well ahead of Armada and Ambassador. SEM-canker rating is a 6, so the same as the comparators. Light leaf spot is a 7, the same as the comparators. Its verticillium resistance is based on limited data, as it is for most varieties. It's been giving an intermediate, and if you recall, verticillium resistance is rated as moderately resistant, intermediate, or susceptible, and we don't have any fully resistant varieties. We don't give it a 1 to 9 scale because there really isn't enough differentiation between varieties to justify that. It does have TUIV resistance, the same as the comparators. Stem stiffness is an 8 based on limited data. Earlier to maturity, it's a 5, so very similar to the comparators, and it does have pod shatter resistance. Moving now to Maverick. Maverick has just been given that east-west recommendation, but it is very high yielding at 109%, and that would make it the highest yielding in the east-west region, well ahead of Adonis and Ambassador. Sorry, ahead of Armada and Ambassador. Stem canker is a 9, and it's one of only a couple of varieties on the list with a 9, the other one being Vegas, well ahead of both Ambassador and Armada. Light leaf spot, like many varieties on the list now, is a 7, matching the comparators, and it's got an intermediate verticillium resistance based on limited data. It does have TUIV resistance. Stem stiffness is an 8 based on limited data. Earliness and maturity is a 5. But it does lack pod chatter resistance if that's a concern to you. Hinster from KWS, again with just an east-west recommendation, 106% on the yield there. So it's just ahead of Armada, but well ahead of Ambassador. Stem canker is a little bit lower at a 5, slightly lower than Ambassador and Armada, but it does have a 7 for light leaf spot and has that intermediate level of resistance to verticillium. It does have TUIV, it's got a stem stiffness of 8, early to maturity of 5, and it does have pod chatter resistance. Next variety is Magellan, east-west gross output of 106, that's the only region it's recommended for, just ahead of Armada, well ahead of Ambassador. Again, just a 5 for stem canker, which could be considered a slight weakness, with a 6 for light leaf spot just below the comparators. But it does have a high level of resistance to verticillium. It's been rated as moderately resistant. It does have TUIV, has an 8 for stem stiffness. Earliest in maturity is a 5, and it does have pod chatter resistance. This slide gives our official variety comments for each of those varieties. I'm not going to dwell on the slide. You can stop the presentation, pause it, and read those at your leisure. Now moving to our new variety recommended for the north, our hybrid variety, that's LG Avenger. I'm comparing it here to Adelaide and Armada. These are our northern region official comparators. Its northern gross output is bracketed, so it's limited data, but it's just 1% below Adelaide and 1% ahead of Armada, and it will be the second highest yielding variety in the north. Stem canker resistance is a 5, same as Adelaide, one less than Armada. Obviously, stem canker less of an issue in the north, and it has a light leaf spot of 7, as do many of the varieties on the list now, same as the comparators. It is susceptible to verticillium resistance, but verticillium perhaps less of an issue in Scotland. It does have TUIV resistance, has a stem stiffness rating of 8 based on limited data. Earliness maturity is a 5, and it does have pod chatter resistance. Again, I won't dwell on the official variety comment. You can read that at your leisure. Move then to our new conventional variety for the north, Powerhouse. Powerhouse has a northern gross output of 102%, 2% ahead of Tom, and 4% ahead of Acacia, and it will have the highest gross output of any conventional variety on the new list in the north. Stem canker is a 5, the same as the comparators, and a 7 for light leaf spot, better than both the comparators, which is obviously a big bonus for the north. It does show susceptibility to verticillium, but then it's not such an issue in the north. It has a good stem stiffness at 8, earliness and maturity is a 5. It does lack TUIV resistance, and it does lack pod chatter resistance, but then most of the conventional varieties do as well. That's just how it is with the conventional varieties. They lack some of the traits that the hybrids do, but they do have that convenience of being able to farm, save seed. Again, I won't pause on the variety comments. So moving finally to the Clubroot-resistant varieties for the UK, Crusoe and Computer, not Computer. I'm comparing them against Chrome and Crocodile. Both those varieties now only have regional recommendations. Chrome can no longer have a east-west recommendation because its stem canker rating has fallen below minimum standard. So looking at Crusoe first, UK gross output of 103%, east-west gross output of 103%, so well ahead of Crocodile, and north gross output of 101%, well ahead of Chrome. In terms of stem stiffness, it's a limited data set, but it's an 8. Stem canker is 7, so well ahead of Chrome and Crocodile by several points. Light leaf spot is a 6, so the same as the comparators, and is moderately resistant to verticillium compared with an intermediate level for Chrome and Crocodile. It does have TUIV resistance, unlike Chrome and Crocodile. Earliest in maturity is a 5. but it doesn't have pod shatter resistance, but then neither do the comparators. Moving now to Computer, UK gross output of 98%, but in the east-west it's 99%, so matching crocodile, and in the north it's 96%, better than chrome. Stem stiffness on limited data is an 8, stem canker is a 5, so better than chrome and crocodile, and light leaf spot is a 6, the same as chrome and crocodile. Like Crusoe, it's moderately resistant to verticillium, which is better than both the comparators, and it does have TUIV resistance, which the two comparators don't. Earliness and maturity is a 5. It lacks pod shatter resistance. I won't dwell on the variety comments. So just to sum up, for the oilseed rape, we have new hybrid varieties for the UK and the east, west and north regions offering good yield gains, a new conventional variety for the north offering high yield, and 2 new clubroot-resistant varieties that offer yield improvement and much better disease resistance for those growers looking for clubroot resistance. That's the end of the presentation. There are other presentations for the other major crops available on our website. Thank you for listening.